Hey guys, this will be video one for the how to design build a replacement neck for a vintage Les Paul custom. And it's really just going to be one video because the only reason I'm doing this video is because I have this neck listed on eBay for sale. And I just want to go into extreme extreme detail as to what is in front of us, so that I don't have to write up a really heavily detailed ad in the listing. So this is probably going to be close to an hour-long video, and I'm going to be pausing throughout the video because I'm actually going to do this work in real time and getting the neck very close to finished, or at least machined, so that the next luthier or whomever buys this neck, they'll be able to very easily finish it and replace the neck in their guitar. Okay, so what is it we're looking at here? I will go into that in much detail later on, but for the most part, this thing could be turned into just about any type of replacement neck for a Gibson Les Paul, or you could even use it as a modern Gretsch Duo Jet replacement neck, okay, or anything that is similar to that, or build your own custom guitar. So this is an outstanding opportunity for someone to pick up a smoking deal on a custom built neck that you could do. It's just, if anything, if you don't have any need for it, it'd be great to have in your arsenal, especially if you're a repair guy. Okay. So, and I've got a video series where I actually built a 1955 Les Paul all Hunter and mahogany Black Beauty replica. And when I say replica, I mean spot on per Stuart McDonald templates. This is the neck that I used. I built this neck in tandem with that video series, so per all these Stuart McDonald templates. So this is about as close to as you can get to the real thing. Okay. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to talk about the scale. Well, actually, I'm going to talk about everything, meaning headstock pitch, and I'll do I'll do a 1,000 foot view right now. This is a 17-degree pitch headstock. That's extremely rare. Call any custom luthier and ask them how much they would charge to build a 17-degree pitch headstock. You know what? In hard maple for a Les Paul custom replacement. And this is just a lower, obviously. I'm not going to be providing any sort of fretboard or building a fretboard, but this is going to be a smoking deal for someone, is where I'm going with this. Okay, 17-degree pitch headstock per mid-50s specs. I think they're only offering that headstock from the custom shop today. So you're getting into the multi-thousand-dollar guitar range when you request that pitch. And does it affect the tone? I don't know. I think it does a little bit. Uh, that guitar right there is a 15 and a half degree pitch headstock, and I love it. It sounds great. This Flying V is a 17 degree. That Flying V is going to be a 17 degree. I have a Les Paul replica over here on the left that is a 17 degree, and it's going to be my personal guitar. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it sounds. But nonetheless, 17 degree pitch headstock. Right now, this thing is 1 3/4 inch nut. Actually, just a little bit more could get cut down. 2 3/16 inch width at the 16th fret. Tenon is per the 80s, 70s, and 80s specs, but I still have the original material where I cut this out in one pass here, and one chop here on the miter saw. So I have those drops that I could epoxy glue back in and turn it into any width tenon you want. Okay. Maple with a Brazilian rosewood center line. We'll get into that. It's called pau fijo, or we know it as pau ferro in the U.S., but I had a guy that watches my channel that is actually from Brazil, and he said that he doesn't understand, and I'm quoting him, he said, I don't know why they call it pau fijo, because it's and Bolivian rosewood, because he said it's actually harvested in you know where. So maybe that's a way around, certain things. but this is stunningly beautiful. Brazilian or Bolivian, we'll call it Bolivian rosewood, and it is quarter sawn, pure quarter sawn. Does it affect the tone and the strength? All day long. It's extremely stable wood. So I got a lot of work to do for the video, and this is where I'm about to pause within a minute or so, and I'm actually going to cut this material off here, and then I'm going to run my router down here, and I'm going to level that. And in other words, within 10 minutes, we're going to have a level fretboard surface, and I'm going to be talking about headstock thicknesses and how you treat overlays and stuff like that, or how you cut your own custom inlays. Because someone may not want to do that. They may want to build their own custom guitar, and you can do your own mother of pearl work and all that type jazz. You can do a real beautiful figured, highly figured, exotic overlay. Sky's the limit. Okay, so otherwise, what is this? To finish what I just mentioned, the scale is going to be either a 24.562 or a 24 and 3/4 per historical specs. And I haven't done the math yet. I did the initial calculations on a 24.562 scale, a 24.75, and a 25, and I only have the numbers so that we can determine what would be the likelihood that we could do a 25-inch scale on this neck, this lower. And I don't think you would be able to, but I'm certain that you could either do a 24.562 or a 24.75. Why would I say that about the 24.562? Because you could go on Stuart McDonald's website and you can order a pretty much any fretboard you want in a 24.562-inch scale. Make your job a lot easier, but you cannot get the 24.75-inch scale from Stuart McDonald. That has to be custom made, and I make my own fretboards. So both of my V's that I've sold, they have the authentic 24.75. So on that note, and you might be, if your eyes are glazing over, well, you're probably not qualified to be building your own guitar anyway. But nonetheless, what I'm talking about is we have to engineer everything from this spot right here where the flat surface starts pitching down, the 17-degree pitch, because everything starts at that point right there. Everything. And then it goes down here and it connects at a certain fret location. And I'll go ahead, I'll keep this a little bit general right now just for entertainment purposes. But on a typical Les Paul Custom, that is your 16th fret location right there. Anytime you're looking at a Les Paul, just go to the third mother of pearl down, and then the one behind that, that's the 16th fret. So if you're looking at the 16th fret, in this design that I have right here, even though this is a partial fretboard, once you go up to this point right here, you have to make certain that you allow for the nut. Okay? And where I'm going with this, I've already allowed for all of those things. So there's nothing weird or funky about my dimensions. I know I have to pause and get a drink of water here in a second, but nonetheless, this will be per 24.562-inch scale or a 24.75, and we'll see if we could get lucky and do a 25, but I don't think so. All right, so let me pause, and I'm going to take my router and start doing some cleanup work and my little handsaw, and then we'll go from there. Okay, we'll discuss this briefly. And by the time this video is over, you'll have a really good understanding of what it is that is in front of us and what it is that we're trying to achieve. But I just wanted you to see it in its really rough state so that you could kind of see if you were going to consider tackling something like this on your own. I'll go into extreme detail as to how I build my necks. Okay, and what is this? It's a flying V, but it's also a 335. It's also a Silverjet Gretsch from the 50s. It's also, well, actually no, because it'd be dovetail, but nonetheless, a neck is a neck. It could be going in a jazz guitar. It could be going in a solid body. So, but the way I build my guitars, I use a double adjustable truss rod, which is obviously the modern design. And as any guys that have been here for a while, you know that I do that because not just to protect the industry, but primarily because from an engineering standpoint, it's unbelievably effective because you can turn it forward and put forward relief into the neck, or you turn it back and you put back relief. With the old vintage necks, you only have the ability to do back relief. And let's say somebody screwed up and put the frets in too tight, well, that neck will start bowing back, and you might not be able to get enough string tension to get that neck to pull back, and now you have a completely ineffective neck. So fret installation can really make or break a neck, especially the old ones. But with the modern design like it's a lot more forgiving. And then, in addition to the fact that it also protects the industry in the event someone built a replica, you know what, and then tried to claim it was an actual 50s guitar. Well, as soon as someone looked down there and saw the double adjustable rod, they'd know that it's not authentic. So how do you do that? All that gets epoxied in, then you come in with your pull saw, you put a level there, shave that stuff off. Why? Because I'm not going to spend any time showing you how to do this, but if you're savvy, that is a dovetail bit and just a little sled that I built. And I could move these in a little bit if I needed to. But I kind of just leave this little thing sitting over in the corner, mocked up for this. And then I actually run that down the fretboard, or run that down the lower. And then I can slowly ease that bit up to the point where it's actually flush. See, right now, and I promised I wasn't going to talk about this. Right now, it's about I don't know, we'll say a 16th. No, it's close to an eighth of an inch. So I make two or three passes and take that down. Even so much so to the point where that last pass, I hit it with some 220 sandpaper on a block, maybe zip, 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 and I'm finished. I don't have to sit here with a pull saw and try to cut all this crap off and run the risk of screwing up the side of the neck, because this is getting very close to being the finished guitar. Okay. So anyway, yeah, I'll go ahead and talk a bit about this. That way I can get this crap off the table. What this is a 3/8 inch radius. Round over bit, because the bottom of my truss rod channel is a quarter of an inch, but it's a half round bottom, so that it matches the actual rod that is in the truss rod, which is round on the bottom. And then so the bottom of my truss rod channel is radiused. It perfectly cradles the truss rod, and I apologize, I just don't have another truss rod in the house to show you, but it perfectly cradles the truss rod. But then the top of the truss rod has a flat bar. Rather than allowing that to be flat on the surface and leaving the neck open, I like to lower the truss rod down in the neck, about right at a little over a 16th of an inch. It's just barely over a 16th of an inch. Is it structural? Not really. But what it does do, it does add some structural integrity, because this little fillet gets epoxy glued back in atop the truss channel. And I'll direct you to some videos later on, or if you're interested, just shoot me a message and I'll show you which video to go to. But that guarantees that the fretboard, that the lower bass side and the lower treble side are now epoxy glued back together. So now you have a continuous connection around the entire perimeter of the truss rod. And therefore, it does act like the 50s design, because the 50s design, they put the truss rod in the neck on a bit of a bow, a pre-bow, because the bottom of the channel was bowed, and then they glued in a fillet, which actually bowed a little bit like this. Therefore, it solidified the neck and it maintained phenomenal tone, phenomenal tone. Even though it was 40s and 50s engineering, possibly even from the 30s. But this is very, very much a complement to that original design, but around a double adjustable truss rod. So I say all that to say this: when you get to the top of this truss rod, everything changes. It's no longer a flat top with a radius bottom. It now goes into a round on the front that looks something very similar to that right there. So you have to um, work around that radius, okay? And that's exactly what that is. That gets epoxied up in there around the actual truss rod, okay? And then what does it also allow? It allows for surface material for your overlay, and it allows wood for the screw to go through. So that's one of the main reasons I do that. Otherwise, you would be able to run the truss rod further out, but it just allows for a much more refined and finished job as well. So got way too long-winded there, but that's a critical part of the engineering of my neck designs. I've never seen anybody do this. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, but it makes a big difference. And I keep this stuff machined in house so that as I'm building guitars, I'll have this on like a 30-inch long piece. I'll just stick it up there because that's 3/8 of an inch wide across that dimension right there, and I'm able to just epoxy that in and do like I just did, cut them off and throw that away. Okay, so let me pause and we'll do some more work. Let me jump back in before I do any of this machine work and show you something that's very important for your carpenter's vise in order to protect everything, as well as give your router something to sled across because this is so narrow. I put these temporary little boards in there, and it's just masking tape on both sides. Then we're going to jet glue it in, and then you'll have something that you can actually put in the carpenter's vise and torque down and not worry about losing control or risking damaging your joining. I mean, your cuts, your pitch cut right there. So, how would I go about doing this? Just kind of estimate where it might be. Couple of fat drops. Gravity will kick in very quickly, so you want to be careful with this. What I'd recommend here, just lay it down flat on the table, put a flat edge up here. We're not trying to get a real nice joint up there. All we're trying to do is make certain that this doesn't get off. And if you get off, just tear it off and start over because it's just scrap masking tape. And one thing I like to do, it's not terribly important, but if I'm about to do some structural, if I'm about to do some routing, and I'm building temporary templates, I go ahead and clamp that because you'd be surprised that jet glue. I call it jet glue. I know it's CA glue, but that jet glue is still a little bit. I'm not going to say wet, but if you put a little bit of crushing pressure on there, it guarantees that it really mushrooms out and really dries. That way, when you're running a router overhead and you're getting ready to do some machine work, you know that you've got a really good glue joint. Again, for this operation, it's not really all that important, and that amount of time that you saw that I just clamped that's exactly all it takes. And now we've got a nice surface by which our little sled can travel across and not run the risk of tipping or screwing up. So let me pause and let me talk about this. Hobby Lobby, $5.99. This is 1 ounce. That's a ton of material. I love the medium, and then there's also the thin, which is really only good for thin application work. But the medium is very, very versatile. It's a great product. So let me start doing some machine work, and then I'll come back and discuss how I work my way to the finish line. Okay, I'll do a bit of a flyby here. One pass. Really taking our time, working our way to the finish line. And this is so much easier and so much cleaner than trying to cut it off by hand. And I basically have this in the carpenter's clamp back there, and I start in that direction, and I just make one slow pass, and I make certain that I keep the bit on the center. And you don't dare move around, because if you go off the side, you'll really tear the neck up. So it's a real controlled single pull, and then all of a sudden back here you're getting ready, you're beginning to cantilever a little bit. So now you've got to put the tool, in this direction, and then push back in that direction. Okay, so your first pass like that right there, keeping your hands out of the way, and then the second pass is that one right there. So now I'm going to lower the bit closer to this edge and probably get it very close to the finish job. And then I'm going to determine, do I want to sand the rest or take a chance on cutting it all the way to the finish line. So let me pause, and we'll make another pass. Okay, second pass, maybe 10 minutes worth of work since I started the operation. Pretty much perfectly flush right there, and almost perfectly flush right there. So, do you try to lower it? Absolutely not, because it's so close. It's hanging a little bit right there. But at this point, you would just want to come in with a scraper and just kind of start marrying the two together. And then I like pulling on just like a clean 90-degree angle. It's pretty good about cutting. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that or done that before, but that's the way I sharpen my chisels. They're more like a what is that knife? Katana. The sword is just a bevel's in, flat edge here, nice and sharp. And then when you're sharpening it, all you're having to do is just pull like this right here, and it makes for a great blade. So, and it's also very stiff. So I'm going to pause, finish this up, which will probably take 30 seconds. I probably could do it on camera just quicker than I could just, I don't even know if that is on camera. I really don't like doing a lot of things on camera with tools, because I've been working with chisels like this for about 35 years, close to 40 years. And, I don't want to make it look easy for someone who's never worked with a chisel like that is surgical sharp, because you slip and you'll really hurt yourself. But I think what I'm doing here is safe enough to show on camera. Nothing too dangerous. But anyway, all right, I'm going to pause, finish it up, be right back. I want to cover something here that I think is really critically important to talk about. And you might be tempted at this point, or in the prior operation, to grab up a really nice flat block like that and some heavy sandpaper and start working on that. But I wouldn't recommend that, because you spent way too much time building the neck, making certain that this surface here and that surface over there are perfectly true, meaning on all planes, whether it be the twist plane. There is no twist, I guess the XYZ is what I'm saying. So at this point, stay away from stuff like that, because what has a tendency to happen with heavy sandpaper, wherever there's an open edge, it has a tendency to round that edge over a little bit. So what I did, I have this little piece of aluminum here from an angle gauge, and I specifically keep this 120. It's folded very, very sharp, so it in essence becomes a tool. That way, I can run right down the center line and just watch myself level up. And in the event I did screw up and go too far, well, And when I say too far, I'm talking one, 1/1000th of an inch, or a half of a thousandth or something like that. You're not running the risk of screwing this up. Also, I've got a lot of notations where I've made notes about certain things, and I don't want to lose those notations because I want to talk about it in the video. But at this point, I'm going to use the jet glue and basically just go down the center until I see the maple get nice and clean. And then that's a Honduran mahogany fillet. I just want to see the two of those get nice and clean. And then at this point, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that there is some debris that would be present in any of the little cracks or crevices. And I'm gonna drop a little bit of thin. Doesn't have to be pretty. Uh, all we're doing at this point is just assuring that we have a good build. And you can even come in at this point, and there's a little bit of let's see if I can get some of that dust out of that cavity. And then a lot of times, what I'll do is just come in overhead and just drop a little bit of that dust and move it around a little bit. And it'll dry within a second or two, and especially if it gets on your skin. That's the thin, Hobby Lobby, $5.99, Extreme Power Thin. It's the best deal out there. And then at this point, be real careful because you will you'll ruin your sandpaper. So I would say, sorry about that, I wasn't prepared. Just have some kind of like some scrapper sandpaper and a little maple block. Again, I want to stay away from these edges. And the more I think about this particular video here, this probably is not going to be a very good video for whomever is buying this neck. So I'll do another video after this that basically shows the neck ready to ship. So, but if you are curious, you can kind of see the thought process that I go through as I'm bringing a neck alive. They're usually not very attractive. And that's what I had meant by in one of the last videos. Typically, the whole job is a series of little corrections and like making little repairs. And see, I screwed up. I knew I would do it. Let me write those numbers back down. 11, 13, yeah, that's 17, 18, and that's 20. And I'll go ahead and cover this briefly, what this means. The 11 millimeter notation right here is the depth of the truss rod channel from this surface here. That's really critical when you start engineering just how thin can you make this neck. If you don't make note of that dimension right there, and then you get all this glued up later on with a fretboard on here and possibly frets in it, and you realize, oh man, this thing is way too thick. Well, now you're able to engineer your job and realize that, okay, I'll be able to take off 2 millimeter before I get anywhere near encroaching on the bottom of that channel. And because that channel changes in its depth, it gets deeper out here, so you have to make note of all that stuff. Okay. So the truss rod channel is 11 millimeter back here, but then once it hits up here, it's 13 millimeter. Okay, so it gets you in trouble. And then that 17 is the upper. So that's what I meant by I didn't want to lose those dimensions. 83 millimeter, that's for a later discussion. That's the 11th fret location, and it is 20 plus. So I almost messed up. But nonetheless, I have a perfectly true surface now, patched up, ready to finish out. And once it does finish out, it will look very much closer to that right there. And I've got the option of flaring out with the 1/2 inch radius, but typically what I do in this situation right here, I just leave it 3/8 of an inch wide, because once someone comes in with their overlay that is prefabricated, or either they make it themselves, they can machine out the remnant. See, just imagine there's a hollow right there for the traditional, if you went with that overlay. And I wouldn't want to come in here and take all this massive wood out, and then you lay that down and realize there's a cavity under there. The more material we can leave in, the stronger and the better the tone. Okay, so let me get this table cleaned up, because it is like purely chaos right now, and then I'll come back and we'll finish the job. Okay, the next thing you're going to want to do is make certain that you are maintaining a perfectly level lower surface, perfectly level there, and perfectly level transition into the headstock overlay surface, not overlay, but the headstock surface. Um, so that's what you can expect when you use the tape and the jet glue. Bear with me, because I hate to leave scraps on my pieces, because if I just throw this over in a box, sometimes it's hard to get that stuff off later on. But clean it up now, and you don't run the risk of screwing up later on, or end up fighting something that's had a little bit of a bleed through. And sometimes I've noticed that if you put too much of the jet glue, which is called CA glue, it'll actually go through the tape. So be careful that you don't use too much, because whatever you might have been trying to protect, it might leave a little bit of a contamination. And I'm fairly certain I've already mentioned this. I still have the drops out of both sides that can be epoxy glued back in if you wanted the wider tenon. This is per the 70s and the early 80s, like the Tim Shaw era specs, where they were doing the short tenon. They were actually cutting this off very short, and it wasn't even going out into the pickup cavity. But we'll cover that stuff later on. This one does go into the pickup cavity. But probably, bar none, the most important thing you want to do at this point is verify that your neck is staying true. Okay, that's so important. It's so important, and also that I can't really verify it here on camera, but you can see, you probably could tell, I don't have any tension on the truss rod. You want the truss rod to be neutral and very flat. And the thing about the double adjustable truss rods, they're when I say hypersensitive, they are hypersensitive. Typically, when I build my guitars, this guitar was built over a year ago, and I'm not kidding you. It's just about that much of back relief. It's not even a quarter of a turn. It's about an eighth of a turn. In other words, when that guitar was built, if that was neutral, by the time I strung it up with the frets in, it ended up being about right there. So it's not like it took even a quarter of a turn, and vice versa. If you go, man, you go that far right there, I guarantee you it's already forward reliefing right now. So let's put it neutral and make certain that we've got a good neck. And we do. We have an exceptional neck from the nut all the way to the end of the tenon. And then if you had some sort of issue, you just need to start addressing what's going on, or in the possibility of sorry about that. I'm sure that was loud as hell. But in the event of the possibility, this is typically what happens. When you build your neck, you put the truss rod in there, you do all this jazz right here, and then you put it on your jig, and you start doing this real thin machine work. Typically, what that neck wants to do, it wants to just kind of relieve a little bit and pull down. I don't consider that a bow, because it's very natural. Because I can take a little bit of forward relief and and go see. I had just a touch of forward relief on that one, holding it perfectly true. But after I had done the machine work, if I took that, it might stay level now, but that's neutral. And there's a possibility it has just a little bit of back relief, because anyone that has ever done a relief carving, uh, I'm not going to start talking about carving, but when you start carving into wood, the board has a tendency to start pulling in certain directions, and you have to carve a little here, shape a little here, carve a little there, shape a little there. It's really dangerous to just go in and just take all this mass material off of one side, unless you're working with Honduran mahogany. This stuff is amazing. You can take a large square board and just machine the devil off of one side, and it just virtually doesn't even move. Maple's a different story. And when you're building a maple neck, it will really test you. This one went together exceptionally well, but typically, this being a two-piece neck, I'll cover this very briefly. When you rough out this, um, was the bass side, and then you rough out the treble side, if there's going to be any problem, anything that's problematic about that board, as soon as you rough it out in that single piece state, it's going to reveal itself. If it wants to bow in or bow out, or bow this way or bow that way, or God forbid it starts twisting. If it starts twisting, I'd say throw it away, or chop it up and use it for ears, these little add-on pieces, because life is way too short to fight maple to the finish line. And maple has a tendency to be more dangerous about warpage as soon as you rough it out than the Honduran mahogany. Okay, so the cool thing about this one, did it warp or twist or any of that stuff? I don't remember. I don't think so. I know it didn't warp to the point where, oh God, there's an issue. But whatever there was, it might have been that I just laid it on my straight edge table, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll just kind of flatten that out a little bit and then glue it up. And that's just guitar building, especially neck building, because you're working with a board now that is maybe, roughly 3/4 of an inch thick here. It's about 3/8 of an inch thick right there, and it's a certain width. It's an itty bitty little board if you really look at it, and it's in within the volume of it, I guess you could say, the cross section volume. Um, Nonetheless, and then not only that, it's actually pitching on a 17-degree angle, and then you're trying to keep it flat. That's what I meant by this is a smoking deal for someone who's never built a neck before, because I've thrown so many necks away 20, 25 years ago as I bought a beautiful piece of maple, started roughing it out, and it just started twisting or going crazy. And you're sitting there looking at a stunningly beautiful figured board that just went where it always wanted to go in the wild. And I say that to say this: you're more likely to get warpage or have problems with highly figured wood than you are real boring, bland wood like this. This is not a very attractive neck. It's meant to be painted, but you know, it is what it is. It's extremely stable, and it's just beautiful how straight it is. So we made certain that we stayed nice and straight. If we found a problem, we determined, well, can we correct it with a little bit of forward relief, or yeah, okay, I'm neutral. Okay, so we can put a little bit of forward relief in it or a little bit of back relief. But if we're having to really, this is so critical. If you're having to do some major manipulation right here in order to get it level, you did a really poor job on your initial rough out. And at that point, I say neutralize it and let's get this surface level. And then even if it changes this location right here, because what you're getting ready to do is you're getting ready to locate and possibly even go ahead and glue down your overlay. And there's a company out of Germany called Crazy Parts, where I restored an actual, it was a 1980 Gibson Les Paul Custom from this fretboard. That was about all that was left of it. That's my very early video series, uh, called Vintage Gibson Les Paul Custom Restoration. If you search Vintage Gibson Custom Les Paul Restoration Deja Blue guitars, you'll see, I think I had something like 40 videos of that guitar, and we started with this right here, and he ordered that overlay from Crazy Parts because I explained to him, I said, I don't want to do anything, that could be deemed a copy or a fake. But the fact that it was an authentic Gibson, I did not have a problem gluing that overlay down that even had the logo on it. Okay. And with that logo in hand, I had already seen one before, but I made a tracing of that. That's the actual Crazy Parts overlay tracing. So when I started building my others, replicas and repairs and stuff like that, then I used that overlay. And I've mentioned it several times. I do not put the Gibson logo on any guitar, and I do everything I can to make certain that the industry is protected, like that double adjustable truss rod. Okay. So at this point, where I'm going with this in a very, very long-winded fashion, I'm getting ready to engineer the distance from this location here, which is the 16th fret, up to this point right here where it starts pitching and pitching down 17 degrees. So let me pause, let me get organized, let me get my other notes, and I'm gonna start giving you actual dimensions and how to calculate in metric, whether it's a 24.562, a 24.75, or a 25-inch scale. In other words, I'm going to convert it to metric. So let me pause, get cleaned up, and as I mentioned, I got a beautiful neck here that's ready for someone to build an outstanding guitar. So I'm ready to pause and move into the next phase. Okay, about to get into some extremely detailed information here, and I'm going to go straight to the finish line and say odds are this guitar is going to be best equipped, or this lower is going to be best equipped for a 24 3/4 inch scale, but the 24.562 inch scale is fine. The 25-inch scale is simply too long. Okay, so now that I got that out of the way, let's talk about how I go about these things, because this is going to be some mind-numbing information if you don't understand building guitars. But if not, just enjoy it and just call it entertainment and just watch how I process through building guitar. Okay, well, let's talk about the basic 58, 59. It doesn't have any binding. Okay, that's your traditional, old guitar design. Okay, when you're building a Les Paul custom and or you're restoring a Les Paul custom, you have to factor in the binding. This is bar none critical. You're going to have binding uh, along the fretboard. We know that, and that binding is going to come up and it's going to stop roughly in that area right there. Now, the binding that is on the headstock cannot be machined down from, in other words, this can't be the top surface of a Les Paul custom or any guitar with a really thick overlay. Okay, because just keep in mind the binding is going to be about 1/8 of an inch thick. Well, if you put the binding, if you took a router, if you put this on the router table and routed the binding channel 1/8 of an inch down, even though right now this is 5/8 of an inch thick and this is slightly over 1/2 inch thick, um, if you were to bind this particular lower by routing down and letting this be the surface, your binding is going to be way, way too far down up on the, in other words, it's going to be way up under the fretboard. Okay. In other words, the fretboard would start somewhere in this area right here, and the binding would end up going up in this area right here. That's wrong. That's wrong luthier work. So what would happen? You would have to come in and take 1/8 of an inch off the whole back, even up here, a full 1/8 of an inch. So this lower, and hear me out, is currently machined in order to allow you to do to turn this headstock into a 58 burst that has no binding, or a 59 burst that has no binding. Okay, and if I lose you, I'm sorry. I don't know how to explain this without just going straight to the finish line. This is designed as an initial platform that the luthier could go any direction. Because I was going to consider building a guitar with this neck that I just really don't have any use for it, so that's why I'm selling it. But if you elect to go with like a crazy parts overlay, and that overlay I know is 1/8 of an inch thick, whatever the metric is, I don't know. It will come up and it will hit the nut, basically at that location right there. It'll be on, you'll have to cut it on a bit of a bevel, and then your binding then will be beautiful because your binding will be sitting atop that surface right there, and it will be 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm doing the best I can to keep this in the camera, but not drop it. Okay. So if that's your overlay and it's 1/8 of an inch thick, as I just mentioned, and it goes up here to your the nut, and the nut ends at that location where it starts pitching, well, then we got to come in and take that 1/8 of an inch off the back there. And the only way I did that on the other two guitars that I built and restored, the first one that I restored, I told the guys, like, look, man, we are at the threshold. This is insanely thin. This is a 1/2 inch thick right here, and about 7/16 of an inch thick out here. The only way that I would build that guitar is if I epoxy the carbon fiber overlay down to the headstock. And quite frankly, it was probably stronger than even this right here, because that carbon fiber is 1/8 of an inch thick. That stuff is incredibly durable. I think it's called carbon fiber. Pretty sure it is. It's a fiber board. I do know that. It's extremely strong. So the reason I'm talking about this in detail is because we're talking about doing a Les Paul custom, and the odds are you're not going to be able to build a Les Paul custom with this lower if you're going to have the binding on it. Okay, you will have to go with the overlay, but I wanted to leave this 5/8 of an inch thick right here and roughly a 1/2 inch thick right there in the event someone bought this with the intention of cutting this down considerably smaller and turning it into a 59. Okay, that's the whole reason I'm doing this. But then it would be a 59 that you've either got to paint or do some sort of stain work or something like that. I'm just trying to keep it as neutral as possible, but nonetheless, I don't have a problem machining this off level, whomever wins it, and at no charge if you elect to go with the Les Paul Custom. Now, I'm not going to turn this headstock into you know what. I'm not going to change this headstock profile. I'm not touching that. But if you want to do that stuff, then it's your project from here on out. Okay. But there's an enormous amount of stuff that has to be considered here. Again, I've got it designed so that it can be turned into a 59 burst if you wanted to. Just paint it black. Do whatever you want. I don't care. It's your guitar. I'm not going to do that stuff for you though. And then leave it this thickness here and that thickness there, and you're good to go with a 58 burst or 59, 60, all that jazz. If you go with the crazy parts overlay, which is 1/8 of an inch thick, I'll take this back off for you. But I won't know until whomever wins it lets me know. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be building a custom, or no, don't touch it. I'm building my own custom guitar, and I want to just take your lower and run with it. Which, truth be known, I'd really prefer that. I really don't want to work on this anymore. I'm so busy on other guitars. But if I do elect to do that for someone, I don't have a problem doing it, and the workmanship will be, exceptional. Okay. So we let's talk about some numbers here. Let me pause and get cleaned up, and I'm going to talk about these numbers that determined the decision that I made. Okay, let's dive back in. Where I was going with this is we're going to be engineering the fretboard scale that we're going to go with, and let's just take some measurements here. I'm measuring from the top of the center. That's the center of the 16th fret location. I am looking at 300 82 and a half. Let's say 382 millimeter. Okay, to where the pitch starts. The imperial is 15 and almost 1/16. Well, it's safe. It's not 15. It's 15 and 1/16 again to the pitch. Keep that in the back of your mind because it's critical. Um, when you look at this neck right here, it's 414 millimeter. And you might be thinking, good God, what is that going? Well, that's the 18th fret location for a flying V. So you see how when you're building a guitar, you could say that you're always working from, now that's not the 16th. Now let me back up. I shouldn't say that. You could assess it from a certain body join location, but in all actuality, we always want to be assessing the lower from where the pitch starts. Both of these are 17 degrees and they are identical in their profile in that fashion, but therein lies the difference between a Les Paul or a Gretsch, like a dual jet or silver jet, and my design. Your traditional flying V mounts at the 19th fret. This is the 18th fret location on my flying V's. When I build them, they're custom. I took the body, I took the neck into the body 1 fret deeper. It took the headstock dive out. Plays much better. Sounds great. Just awesome guitar as far as design goes. But it's very critical that we assess and engineer everything from that point right there, and then we have to determine, well, now how do we start engineering everything from our fretboard calculator, because, and also how wide is our nut. If the nut is a Floyd Rose, it's going to be a half of an inch. That's going to be what, 12 and a half millimeter probably. This is 5 millimeter for a traditional bone nut. This is designed for a traditional bone nut guitar. We'll take that straight to the finish line. But when you go on your fretboard calculator and you're looking at your various scale options, when I'm designing and building a guitar, I have this chart that I work from that is my scale comparatives. I have a 24.562, 24.75, 25, 25 and a half, and even a 34-inch bass. So I'm working in the parameters of from the nut to the 16th fret location. That's all I want to be concerned about right now. But keep in mind, I said from the nut. When I say the nut, well, which side of the nut? The side of the nut that's on the fretboard side, or the side of the nut that's on the headstock side. When you're looking at your fretboard calculators, they are always calculating it from the beginning of the fretboard. So if I have dimensions from TundraMan fretboard calculator, and it says that from the nut to the 16th fret, that means from the beginning of the fretboard to the 16th fret location is 376.054 millimeter. Now, if I want to put a Floyd Rose on this baby and I want it to look correct, I'm going to have to add half of an inch platform to receive the Floyd Rose. But for this one, I add 5 millimeter. Does that make sense? So let's recap that. From the 16th fret location to the nut, the beginning of the nut or the beginning of the fretboard join, 376.054 millimeter. If you add 5 millimeter to that, you get 381.054 millimeter. So that's a 24.562. In other words, 381.054 millimeter to the top edge of the nut or the beginning of the pitch. That ought to make perfect sense. If it doesn't, just rewind and think back through what I just said. And I apologize if I confuse you bringing up the Floyd Rose, but all I meant was the nut that you elect to go with is going to determine how long that lower has to be. And I'll just leave it at that. Otherwise, I'll start confusing you, or I'll confuse myself. So if it's a 24.75 inch scale, it's 378.932 millimeter from the beginning of the fretboard to the 16th fret. Add 5 millimeter, it's 383.932. Okay, that's where I got my calculations, and I realized, or I ascertained, what is it that I have in front of me, and what are the tolerances. And I'm looking at 383, basically, right at about 383 millimeter. So I'm 383.932. I'm under that. But by the time you come in with the 1/8 inch overlay, okay, even if this cantilevered out a 1/2 of a millimeter, it's perfectly okay. It could cantilever. The actual nut could actually go all the way out to the pitch, and then you could cut the nut on a 17-degree bevel. Or in other words, let me make sure that I clarify this. If you got yourself in trouble, you could bring your fretboard it doesn't matter. You could bring your fretboard anywhere you want, beyond idiocy. You want to stop at a realistic point. And also keeping in mind that binding. I'm going to start talking about that because I'll start confusing you, and I'll confuse myself as well. But see how that starts floating, and there's a little bit of a cavernous area under there. Well, then you'd have to cut the bottom of the nut on the pitch to meet there, and there's nothing wrong with that. Do that all the time, and then this would come up in this fashion like that. But it's better if they're designed back here. Okay, so I said all that long-winded crap to get to the point that this lower is machined per vintage specs. And when I say vintage specs, the 24.75 inch scale, which you can't get that fretboard off the shelf, means it's vintage and it's custom. This lower is designed to be a vintage specs guitar. Okay. I'm going to pause and collect myself because that was a ton of information, and I hope I explained it in enough detail that it was just understandable, but not confusing. So let me pause and get organized, and we'll go from there. Okay, should be able to finish the video here fairly soon, but I will show this briefly to give you an idea of what the center line is made out of. That is Bolivian rosewood. And I'm showing you the straightness of it. And you might think, well, yeah, it's because it's a really nice fat board. But this is where I cut out the lower bout for a classical guitar that I'm going to be building. And if that doesn't tell you how stable the Brazilian is, it's called pau ferro. I've already covered this. It's Bolivian rosewood, but this guy told me that they actually harvest it out of Brazil. So who knows? I'm going to call it pau ferro, or we call it pau ferro in the States, but very straight, very stable. The center line of that neck is out of the out of this remnant here. Okay. Very beautiful wood, and when I say it's quarter sawn, you see how you see all of the annular rings. It clarifies. I mean, that's plain sawn right there, and you see all the figure. So it's basically perfectly quarter sawn because this is a back and side set. Okay. So and also, before I forget, I'll just show this briefly just to kind of show you what you could expect, what I'm talking about. See how that ends there, that fretboard, and goes into this guitar. Why? Because this is a like a 50s custom funky guitar that I'm building. This is my guitar, my custom guitar, and but it's kind of like a 59. It's going to be like a 58, 59, 60 gold top, but all 100 mahogany like the 55, and then when you look at this overlay right here, you see how I finished it out with the real sweet 3/8 of an inch access, so that it just has the real simple connection right there. Just very, and see, look at that, I'm neutral, and I got a beautifully, perfectly level neck. Why? Because I'm doing all my prep work. Okay, so, and that's what I meant by when you're laying this out in order to receive this nut. Well, then in the 59, the overlay is going to, there is no binding, so the nut is going to be very tall. That one will get cut down a little bit, but in all actuality, not to throw you a curveball, this one is going to get a Floyd Rose, so I'm going to be designing and building my own custom nut that is locking. Okay, so, and when you're building your neck, you're thinking about all those things on the front end, and you're determining how it is you want to finish the guitar. Because if you roughed all this out with the intention of receiving a Floyd Rose nut, you're gonna be in a world of trouble if you change your mind and go to just the real thin 5 millimeter bone, unless you go with the longer scale. Okay, that might allow you to go with the 25-inch scale. But what do we got in front of us? Basically, a guitar neck that will fit perfectly into Dan Erlewine's 59 Les Paul Burst from Stuart McDonald. I've built several guitars from these templates, and obviously there's the neck profile. Here's the top. Okay. Now I already had this design, and you can also see where this one is 1 1/2 inch and mine is slightly over 1 1/4. I'll talk about that stuff in the future in the listing. I'll discuss some of those differences and how I'll be happy to. I already covered that. How I'll be happy to fatten it up and epoxy that together. But that's what you're building, and that's what I meant by, see, someone could buy this neck. I'm so glad I'm going off the cuff here. You might not be able to see this, but it's scored on the back side, and those two little score lines represent the nut location. See, someone could take this neck and even look where the truss. This is really important. I hope I can get this to pick up. See this location in here? There's your, typical access. There's your nut location, and obviously there's all your tuner locations. That's a 59. That's a 59 burst. So yes, you can build a custom, and if you wanted to build a 55 custom, 54, 56, 57 burst, 58 burst, 59, or anything custom, or you could take this neck and cut it down, and you can see how much considerably smaller the 59 is. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. It goes right there. It's even smaller than I thought, because I had to get the end of the nut at the beginning pitch, which this would get a little thin overlay, like I just showed you on the last guitar. That would be painted black, okay, no binding. And then your headstock would be cut down considerably. And if you were like, oh man, I really want that 59 profile, what will you charge me to trace your Stuart McDonald template around there? No charge at all. I'll trace that for you. And if this neck sells for in the few $100 range, I'll do it for free. But if this neck sells really low, I'm not doing any free stuff. Okay, so just make sure that you're aware of that. I'm so busy, and I just don't have time to, give anything away. But this neck could be turned into pretty much anything you want to do. You could even do like the Gretsch. Do a penguin probably, but you'd have to change the headstock, and I know you'd have to change the ears. You'd have to do a lot of glue up, but you could turn it into a Gretsch penguin. You could easily convert it into a Gretsch Silverjet, which is a very, very small headstock, or it's a replacement for a Les Paul Custom. So let me check and see what else I might need to cover. I think otherwise I'm just going to end the video doing some sealing with the lacquer, because we're already over an hour. Hey, it's a long video, so let's just do that. Let's just go out with a bang. anytime you're doing a job like this and you have raw wood that you've just machined, uh, always seal it, because if not, you'll forget, or either something will happen like what happened with this neck. Uh, and this thing was built, I don't know, probably a year ago. I think it's 11 or 12 months ago from the original video. And I kept it all sealed, wherever I did work. But one thing I will say this, if you go back to the video series called Building a 50s Burst or Black Beauty, around video 3, 4, and 5, I start showing this neck in its raw form. I'm talking like a board. It's just a board. And then I start talking about how while we're waiting on the wood and the templates and all that stuff to come in from Steve McDonald, I'll just go ahead and build this neck on camera. And I don't recall how much detail I went into, but that was where this neck materialized, and that was 11 months ago. And I always kept things sealed. And let's do a little bit of nitro on this Brazilian rosewood, and it is stunning, so beautiful. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you're good with your lacquer tint and you know how to use the trans tint lacquers, you might want to keep this as a clear coat neck and come in here and expose that beautiful quarter sawn Brazilian rosewood. That's actually kind of what I was planning on doing. I was going to build, we'll call it a Les Paul, but it was going to be clear and that wood was going to be shown. But it just really isn't the most beautiful wood, and it has a little bit of discoloration right here. And when I'm building a clear coat guitar, because I used to build a lot of jazz guitars, I was working with highly figured woods and at least a little bit of bear claw. And the only figure that this neck has is just that little bit right there. That's about it. I say that it might have a little bit of figure to it, but it's too bad that the whole neck wasn't figured like that, because that would have been a $1,000 neck. It would have with that Brazilian rosewood in the middle. Okay. All right. So I'll end the video with how I typically always do. You could also come in the back and do, if you were to do the stinger, okay, if you were going to consider doing some clear coat, you could come in here and paint the headstock with the stinger and cover up all of these glue joints where it has the ears. In other words, the whole headstock would be black, but then it would have the stinger detail. Or the stinger back. Okay, black on the front, typical design, clear coat on the side, because I did an exceptional job matching the maple. It's definitely stain grade worthy. All the match work that I did up here, I'm glad I'm going off the cuff here. And then if you wanted to, then you could come in and do some, some just creative stain work. I'm going to spill that lacquer if I'm not careful. You might come in and, smoke that out like a deep brown or black, and then kind of expose a little bit of the maple, but especially expose the Brazilian rosewood right up the middle. And it'd be a beautiful guitar, because I did match the annular rings. It is riffs. It's a riff sawn neck, but it flares out on the bottom there and it flares out on the bottom there. It'd be really beautiful. But I'm going to end the video just because it's getting so, long-winded. But this baby is perfectly true, 100% S4S, square, 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 square. It's a perfect neck. There's no hiccups whatsoever. Okay, so I appreciate you guys staying in the ring, because this was an extremely long-winded and unprepared, probably somewhat boring video, but I hope you got a little bit out of it, because it has the potential to build a phenomenal sounding guitar, and a really good-looking guitar. It would be beautiful if you paint it black nitro and put it on a custom, you know. But if it's just a clear coat guitar, it'll just be a good looking little guitar. Okay. All right. So again, appreciate you guys checking in. And if you got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll list it probably starting the auction tonight, and just I'm just going to move it. I'm not trying to make any money off of it. I just want to get it out of the shop because I know I'm never going to build anything with it. And it's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that I just really don't need it. So I appreciate you guys checking in, and we'll talk to you later.